YouTube, welcome to my channel. To all my new subscribers, thank you. Go ahead and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified every time I upload a video. To all my old subscribers or my current subscribers, welcome back. Today, I want to talk about how he's with you in the fire. And when I say he, I'm talking about Jesus Christ our Lord. And we're going to come from the book of Daniel, starting at chapter 2. And we're going to go on into chapter 3. And basically, this is the story about the 3 Hebrew boys or young men who stood up to the king and refused to bow down to his God because they served a bigger God, the God of heaven and earth. And this is how the story begins. So we find King Nebuchadnezzar, and starting in Daniel chapter 2, he's having trouble sleeping. He's been having these dreams that are keeping him awake at night. And what he does is he go ahead and he calls in all his wise men. Now in that time, wise men were soothsayers and astrologers and magi's, crystal ball readers. You get where I'm going with this. But he called all the so-called wise men in, and he began to converse with them. And the way the king approached it, he asked them to not only, I guess, give him the meaning of his dream, but to actually tell him what he's been dreaming. And so he's telling this to one of the wise men, and they repeatedly ask him, okay, king, tell us, what is it of your dream? And the king said, no, you tell me my dream. That way I'll know that you are real and true. And the wise man refuted and said, how can I tell you of what you dream? No man in this world can tell you that, only the gods. And the king got upset by this. Now you got to think about it. Let's get some back history on the type of man the king was. See, the king was, let's see here, King Nebuchadnezzar was a warrior king, often described as the greatest military leader of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. He ruled from 605 to 562 BCE. So he was basically a general that was a king. So he was a hard man. And it basically shows up in the text because he's quoted as saying, hold on, let me bring it up, because he's in Daniel chapter 2 when he speaks to the wise men. This is what he says to them. Hold on, let me bring it up. Hold on, hold on, hold on. There we go. Daniel, the 2nd chapter. Okay, it says, okay, we're going to pick up here. Actually, let's pick up in verse 1 of chapter 2. It says, in the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was so troubled that he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. Then the astrologer answered the king, May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it. The king replied to the astrologers, This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, it will have I will have to cut into I will have you cut into pieces and your house turned into a pile of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards of great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me. Once more they replied, Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it. Then the king answered, I am certain that you are trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping to hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you are a true interpreter. The astrologer answered the king, There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal the king except the gods. No one can reveal the king's dream except the gods. And they do not live amongst humans. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men in Babylon. So the king wanted to go ahead and execute all the wise men in Babylon. And this is where we find Daniel, because Daniel was one of the Hebrews that were caught in exile in Babylon during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. And not only was Daniel, but also three of his friends, which was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And what happened was King Nebuchadnezzar saw them, and he saw that they were nice looking, well built young men. And he wanted them trained to be placed in his palace. So he had them brought over. He brought them alongside him to Babylon, and he had them trained for 3 years to serve in his palace. And so at this time, right when the king ordered the decree for all the wise men to be put to death, Daniel caught word of that, and he asked one of the soldiers, "What is the king upset about? What is going on?" And the soldier told him. So Daniel went in and spoke with the king. And what Daniel said is, "Give me some time. Give me some time, and I'll be able to not only reveal what you dreamed, but also I will be able to interpret it." So Daniel went home. Well, the king gave him some time, and Daniel went home, and he spoke with his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he asked them to pray. Pray that God reveals to him what the king's dream was. And that night, Daniel had a vision, and it revealed to him what the king's dream was. So Daniel prayed and gave thanks to God. And the next day, Daniel went and spoke with the king. And Daniel was able to not only tell the king about what he dreamed about, but he was able to interpret it and help the king understand that he was dreaming of the future of his land and the things that were going to take place after his reign. And so, for this, the king not only bowed down and exclaimed that Daniel's God was the God that was true, but he gave Daniel power, and he gave Daniel power within the palace. Now, Daniel did request one thing of the king. He asked that his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, also be given power. And let's see here. We're going to go back here. And it says right here, it says, "Moreover, Daniel requests the king to appoint Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were appointed administrators over the province of Babylon. And so this is where the story begins. After giving the brief history, so now the king decides to build a, what is this? A 60 cubic gold statue. It was, let's see here, it says it was, hold on. Okay, it says it was 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. So that's 1 cubit equals 1.5 feet. So we're looking at about 90 feet in height and about 9 feet in width. And it was out of gold. And so the king came up with this, that anytime the music is played, the harp, the lyre, and all the other bells and whistles, that every man was supposed to bow down and worship the statue. And okay, the reason why I'm laughing is because when the king gave the decree, the wise men, the ones that were jealous of Daniel, stepped forward, and one of them spoke up, and they told the king, they said, "Everyone will bow down to your statue except the three Hebrew men that you put in power under Daniel. And King Nebuchadnezzar basically got upset and he was like, what? Oh, they will bow down. I mean, these are my words, but that's basically how the text goes. And so he sent for them. And when he sent for them, they came and they arrived at his palace. And he said, now these are his words. Let's. Okay, hold on. Okay, we're picking up in the third chapter of Daniel, starting at verse 13. It says, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So those men were brought before the king, and King Nebuchadnezzar said to them, it is true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my God or worship the lyre, the harp, the pipe, and all kinds of music. If you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Okay, picking up in verse 19, it says, then King Nebuchadnezzar was furious, and with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he had his attendant to throw them into the fiery furnace. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, and had them bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And those 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. So not only did the flames kill the soldiers, but that were throwing the 3 Hebrew boys into the fire, but he had them bound and tied up completely, and they were thrown into the fire. Now, this is the kicker here. It says, then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that were tied up and thrown into the fire? They replied, Certainly, your majesty. He said, Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, abound and unharmed, and the fourth looks like the Son of God's. Now, who you think that was? So, this is where God comes in at. See, the saying is true and correct. Might not be there when you want him, but he's always on time. And the reason being is, I really believe that God allowed those boys to be tied up and thrown into that fire just so he can show up and show out. You see, when God does something, God is not doing it just for you and for me. God is doing it for all those that are around us too. You see, when God saves us all. Remember, I told you God is always leaving room for us to be saved. And God wanted to make sure that King Nebuchadnezzar knew that he was the one true living God, the God above all other gods, the God of heaven, the Hebrew God. And so God allowed them to be thrown into the fire, and he protected them. And that's how it is. Jesus is right there with us in the fire. It may be rough. It may be hard. Sometimes we might not even know what is going to happen. But if you keep Jesus close, if you keep God close, God always shows up when we need him. Don't be afraid of the fiery flames. Don't be afraid of their threats. Matter of fact, it says it in his word, coming from Luke 21, starting at verse 12. And it says, But before this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to the synagogue and put you in prison. And you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name. And so you will bear testimony to me. But make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourself. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers and sisters, relatives, friends. They will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me. But not a hair on your head will perish. Stand firm, and you will win life. See, God is with us. Jesus is with us. And just like those 3 Hebrew boys, they couldn't be touched. And getting back to the story, it says, King Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. You see, remember, before he threw them into the furnace, they told him, we serve the one true living God. We will not bow down to your God. And so King Nebuchadnezzar actually sees now that their God is the one true God, because he brought them out of the fire. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the straps, I'm sorry, they came out of the fire, and the governors and all of the royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was their hair, nor was a hair on their heads had been singed. Their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Then King Nebuchadnezzar said, Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent this, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree the people of any nation and language who says anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their house turned into a pile of rubble. For no other God can save in this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So not only did they come out of the fire okay, not only did Jesus meet them in the fire, but they came out and they were promoted. And that's what Jesus is doing, is wants to do for us. Jesus wants to be there with you through the fire. And not only will Jesus see us through, but we get promoted. I don't know about you, but I know sometimes the silence can weigh heavy. Sometimes it feels like God is not listening. Jesus is not there. But can I tell you he is? Can I tell you that his ear is always inclined to listening to you and to me? He may not be there when we want him, but he's always there on time when we need him. And Jesus wants to meet you in every situation. He's with us in the fire. Be strong and know that Jesus is with us in the fire. It says in 2 Peter chapter 3, starting at the 11th verse, it says, Since everything will be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought we to be? We ought to live holy and godly lives as you look forward to the day of God and speed its coming. That day will bring about the destruction of the heavens by fire, and the elements will melt in the heat. All while we're waiting on Christ. So take heart. Know that Christ is with you. It may be silent, but stand and stand firm and don't give up. God bless.